Today's lesson is on how do we review Chapter 3. Compare the properties of the two functions. We have a table and a graph. Take a second to copy down the question, the table, and the graph. The first thing we have to see when we compare two functions is determine if they are both linear or if one is nonlinear. The graph is easy to see since this is a straight line. My graph is a linear function. Now for the table, I have to determine what the rate of change is to see if it's constant. My x values are all increasing by 2. My y values from 2 to negative 4 decreases by 6. Negative 4 to negative 10 also decreases by 6. Negative 10 to negative 6 also decreases by 6. So my slopes are all the same. Negative 6 over 2, negative 6 over 2, negative 6 over 2, all equal negative 3. So the table is also linear. So since they are both linear, I'm going to compare my slopes and my y-intercept for both of them. I already have my slope for my table as negative 3. Now I'm going to determine my y-intercept. To determine the y-intercept, I can just work backwards in my table. To get from 1 to 0, I need to subtract 1, so that would get me to 0. Since I added or subtracted half of what I've been doing, I'm going to do the same thing here and subtract 3. Add 3, because I'm doing the opposite. 2 plus 3 is 5. So my y-intercept of my table is 5. Now I'm going to determine my slope and y-intercept for my graph. My y-intercept is easy to see. That's where my graph touches the y-axis. So my graph touches my y-axis at 5. So my y-intercept is 5. Now to determine the slope, I'm going to pick another point. I see that I go up 1. So that's my change in y. And I go over 1, 2, 3. And then I look at my x values to see that they're all going by 1. So my slope would be 1 over 3. So I can state that both functions have the same y-intercept and the table has a slope of negative 3 and the graph has a slope of 1 over 3. So you will have to write out that sentence for each question when you compare two functions. The second question. Find the equation of the line through the following 2 points, 9, negative 3, and negative 2, 5. Take a second to copy down the question. When I'm finding the equation through 2 points, I'm going to start with my slope formula. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I'm going to label my 2 points, x1, y1, x2, y2. It does not matter how you label the points, just as long as the x1 and y1 are together, and x2 and y2 are together. So now when I substitute in, I have to be sure to use parentheses. So my y2 value is 5 minus my y1 value of negative 3. My x2 is negative 2 minus my x1, which is 9. My two negatives turn into a positive here. 5 plus 3 is 8. Negative 2 minus 9 is negative 11. So my slope is negative 8 over 11. So now I can write out my y equals mx plus b. I already know my m. Y equals negative 8 over 11x plus b. Now I have to determine what my b value is. I can pick either point. I'm going to pick the second one because the numbers are smaller. So I have 5 equals negative 8 over 11 times 2 plus b. Now to simplify, I have 5 equals 8 times 2 is 16 over 11 plus b. I can subtract 16 over 11 from both sides. 5 minus 16 over 11, I can turn that into 5 over 1 multiplied by 11 in the numerator and denominator. 55 over 11 minus 16 over 11. 55 minus 16 gives me 39 over 11. So 39 over 11 equals b. I can just leave that number as a fraction. So my equation would be y equals negative 8 over 11 x plus 39 over 11. It is okay for your y-intercept to be a fraction or a decimal. And the last question, which of the following set of points represents a function? If one does represent a function, create an arrow diagram. Take a second to copy down the question. So in order for a set of points to represent a function, remember, each x value has only one y value. So I look to see where each x value only has one y value. Here the 0 goes to 4, but here the 2 goes to 4 and 5. So that is not a function. Here I have 6 going to 0, 5 to 0, 4 to 0. All those x values are different, so that is a function. For here I have 6 and 6, so that is not a function. Here the 0 goes to 4 and the 0 goes to 5, so that is also not a function. So the only one that's a function is the second one. So now I'm going to create my arrow diagram. I have my x and my y. My first x is 6, and that goes to 0. My second x is 5, and that also goes to 0, so I'm not going to write another 0. I'm just going to draw it to the same one. And my last x is 4, and that also goes to 0. So this would be my arrow diagram.